Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast with Jesse, Heater, and MJ. In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing Netflix's fifth film, the 2016 satirical comedy Special Correspondents, starring Ricky Gervais, Bana and Vera Farmiga. Each presenter is going to start off with a round-the-table fast flicks, but before we do that, welcome, boys. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jesse.
Good to see you both.
I'm looking forward to having a chat about this one because I think we might have some varying opinions on it.
It's good. It's good when it's like that.
Can't wait. It is. It's good. It's good. So we're going to go around the table. Each of us is going to do a quick 30-second summary of the film. I'll kick off things today. So for me, Special Correspondents is about a cocky radio celebrity thinking he's king of the world. He's summoned to take a job in Ecuador and decides to take the sound engineer with him. The engineer loses their tickets and passports, so they set up a studio in the restaurant across the road from their work. They con the public into believing they're in Ecuador before they really go to Ecuador and are really taken hostage. They return home and live happily ever after. I love my happily ever after endings.
It's a good little summary.
All right, Heater.
All right, so a radio journalist and his technician are sent to Ecuador to report on a rebel uprising. However, lose their passports and tickets before they make it to the airport. Instead of telling their work, they hide out in an apartment across the road from their office and pretend to report from Ecuador. Things get out of hand when they end up faking their own kidnapping.
Good. Very similar. I wonder why. We must have watched the same movie.
Well,
MJ is more subjective fast flicks. I have to have a flavour of my own opinion in always. Ricky Gervais and Bana buddy up in a relevant comedy about fake news and working remotely. A likeable cast and an enjoyable storyline result in a generally satisfying hour and 40 minutes of comedy, sprinkled in with some welcome drama and a nice lesson in not letting a lie spiral out of control.
Good, yeah. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
I must say, I knew nothing about this film before I watched it, and I tend to do that with a lot of these films that if I haven't seen them on Netflix, and I know we're going to watch them for the purpose of this podcast, I don't want to know much about them. So it got to the point where they got to the airport when they didn't have the tickets. And we don't have the tickets, and I'm thinking ooh, how are they going to get to Ecuador now?
Yeah.
Are they going to break into the country? And then it sort of kept going on, and they were brainstorming what to do. And I'm like, well, they got to get to Ecuador, that's their job. And I didn't realise that the whole film was about them not actually being in Ecuador. So maybe I quite enjoyed that little twist. But I'm sure if anybody had watched the trailer, or even if you had probably read the synopsis, you might have
or read the 2-line summary on IMDb about what the film was about.
I didn't know that was.
Or had a look at the film poster, or any of those things probably.
Hey, the film poster has them missing in Ecuador, and I was like, okay. So maybe...
While they're standing in New York City.
I didn't read that much into it. Two New York guys lost in Ecuador.
Good. So, what are some things we learned about this film, or some things that we've discovered?
It was a remake of a 2019 French movie of the same name. 2009, well, that's not
29. They're making it next year.
2009. 2009. Apologies.
2009.
I always get the dates wrong.
Can you tell me what it was in French? What's the title?
It was the French
Special Correspondents.
Yeah,
I'm just giving you a setup. Envoyes tres
I did actually look to see, maybe I can say this, and went, nah, you know what? It's just a French remake.
Yeah.
Of the same name translated in French.
Yep. I'm horrible with French. Oui. Anything else we'd like to talk about?
I always had was that Netflix bought the rights for about $12 million.
Okay. Got some budgets there. I like that.
Bit of cash.
What about you?
Ricky Gervais was actually pretty pumped to do this, and I think historically a lot of the work that he's done has been kind of on those smaller fringe channels because it gives him more of a license to do what he wants to do. So he's kind of talking about Netflix as seeing the return of the auteur, basically the writer, director, the star. It's his vision. At the end of the day, he said he liked the fact that there were no middlemen. There was no one that was trying to make it more commercial. Basically, the sky was the limit, and it came up to him and what he wanted to do. So it was pretty clear that it was touched by him pretty closely on all fronts, and be interesting to see how that does keep developing with the sort of films that Netflix pick up. Because I'm sure directors would love that kind of.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think also that I guess that and Ricky was a big part of why Eric Bana started in the movie. I was reading an interview that Bana did, and he said that if it wasn't Ricky Gervais that approached him, then he probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, right.
It was just he was a big fan of Ricky, and when he kind of approached him about, he's the writer, director, actor, he's going to do it with him, Bana went, yep, all right, I'm in. But only pretty much because it was Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, right.
It's interesting because he's selling this on Netflix, allowing him to do this. But you look at people like Jordan Peele, who get use small studios like Blumhouse to be able to put what they want in a film, do what they want in a film. Even you look at Bradley Cooper, who's been able to write the screenplay, direct, star in A Star Is Born as well. So maybe it's not just Netflix at the moment that are allowing people to take on that sort of role.
That's fair.
Also, I think it's big. They're all kind of following, I guess, the Clint Eastwood kind of role. He's kind of really, in the last few years, really started doing all of that.
And he's been doing that for years. The interesting thing I saw was so in the office in the radio studio office, there was a wall of employee photos. And they had Finch's photo was a headshot of David Brent
from the office. Yeah,
the office, which I thought was pretty
He's
cool.
actually done alright to shake that tag because Ricky Gervais is David Brent. It's he can't do anything else, and it's fine because he's brilliant at what he does. I think he's hilarious.
Yeah, critically, this film
Bad.
copped a bit of a bagging.
It wasn't great.
Very negative.
Very negative. 18% on Rotten Tomatoes.
18.
Yeah.
18. I read quite a few reviews kind of in the last week from critics who were all just saying it wasn't funny. I disagree with them completely, but it got slammed, by the critics.
I tend to agree that when we get up to some favourites of the scenes, I'll do my rankings again based on how many laughs I had in a film to tell you whether I think it's a comedy.
This was more than just a laugh out loud comedy, though. There was more story to it. There was a different feel to it. It wasn't like The Ridiculous Six that tried to make you laugh at every single opportunity. And Ricky Gervais does have that dry, awkward sense of humour.
Yeah.
You're not going to be falling over the ground laughing. So I think it's...
I was really surprised by the critics, though.
So was I.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't know anything about the film before I watched it. I didn't know anything about the consensus after I watched it. When I was reading it, I was, maybe people like to go a little bit hard on these sorts of films.
I think they do as well.
Yeah.
What about the characters? Were there any that we really liked or didn't like?
I loved Frank, the character that Eric Bana played. Thought he did a really good job and just really loved that character. One thing was his accent. It really, I thought it really chopped and changed the first half of the movie. I thought the second half of the movie he settled into it.
It is groove.
But the first half of the movie, that really kind of changed a fair bit from scene to scene. I thought the accent.
I did notice that as well.
Besides that, I really liked Frank's character.
So this is a real character-based
film.
Yeah.
Massively. If you don't like either of the two, Frank or Ian, you're not going to like the film.
So probably one of my biggest criticisms of the film as a whole was the distinct lack of character development throughout the film. And I thought Frank specifically, as we're talking about, he's such a flawed man at the beginning of the film. And they really set it up for him to be able to change his way. He's this real arrogant reporter who sort of plays by his own rules, doesn't have any close friends, but nothing actually happens to change that.
No, he doesn't.
And you kind of get the consensus that him being exposed to the sweet, kind Ian Finch, it's going to rub off on him a little bit. But it doesn't happen. And I think the second half of the film, Frank actually slips into being the second fiddle character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's still that same charismatic, arrogant rock star. And even at the very end, he walks off the plane and he's the one just waving to the crowd and speaking into the mic. And you sort of sit there at the end and go, nothing.
He also does, I guess, in that scene, he highlights the real hero here is Ian Finch.
But is that them as filmmakers just saying, hey, we've developed this character, he's good now because he's acknowledged.
Yeah.
And
But he wasn't.
He wasn't.
I didn't
Exactly.
get
There was
that at
nothing
all.
in the film that... But then why get him up on stage to say Ian's the real hero? Right?
To me, getting him on stage was just, to me, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
He's the one that's the...
And I get that. So why doesn't he just say, I saved us?
I guess also...
There was a bit of a subtlety
in terms
to
of
it.
that, Ian is also the technician who doesn't, do the public speaking and stuff, whereas obviously Frank is a lot more confident in speaking. So you get him up there because he's the speaker. you know, to do the interviews, whereas Ian obviously isn't as good in the limelight, I guess.
Who is the main character of this film? Because they set it up really strongly, to be frank. You watch that opening scene with him listening in.
Frank's is the alpha, but I think it is, you know, Frank and Ian are the two main characters. I think, you know, they try and make it as much 50-50 as possible while always showing that there is an alpha.
So Finch in the first probably half an hour basically only appears in the film as part of Frank's story. You're following Frank around, and when he crosses path with Finch, he's in it. But when he's not even in it. But then by the end of it, it just changes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this is Finch's story about his development, about his wife, and I found that a bit strange. I think as film goers, you get accustomed to certain ways of understanding what the director's trying to tell you, and I wasn't quite sure what he was trying to do for a lot of that. And it just felt a little bit clunky to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like they did the start part of the setup was about how bad Ian's wife is as well as a character. Like the setup from the start included her.
I hated her.
You hated her?
Oh, Vera Farmiga was fantastic. She played a great role, I thought. Character just hated her.
Of course.
Which is supposed to, though.
I thought we might get into this a bit later, but we're here now. Like, why were they together in the first place? I know they set it up that she's going to screw him around and it's okay. Because
that was a big thing for me. Is like I don't see how those two get together.
It never added up.
It was kind of like, you know, they met and like she moved here with him because she thought he thought that he was going to make it big.
Yeah.
But it never happened. So yeah, really kind of did. Yeah, she just wanted to ride the coattails, and then through those coattails get famous herself. Obviously, it showed, you know, she wanted to, you know, do all these singing and stuff like that. But yeah, that kind of just relationship in general is kind of like it just doesn't feel like it would ever happen.
Yeah,
her story for me, because she was very much a bit part early on, but her story just dragged on. Like the character was set up really quick, really simply, and then throughout it she became more and more prominent. But we never learned anything new about her. But they kept drumming in that message of
really could have cut out a good 10-20 minutes.
That to me, that was the one part of the movie.
I think the ones that really annoyed me, her song.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Ridiculous Six and this both got these.
Her song. We've got to make these
connections. We've got to make these connections.
Her photo shoot. Both of those scenes I don't think were necessary to be in there. Really could have cut out a bit of time there by taking out.
You didn't learn anything new about it. You knew that that's how she was, and that's what she was doing.
I didn't understand why the photo shoot was in there.
Yeah.
Like, you already knew about her like that. It just seemed really silly. And I'm like, straight away, I think, you know, this movie as a whole I enjoyed, but it did drag out a little bit. Straight away there, you can cut that scene straight out, I thought.
Yeah.
What did you think of the characters, Jesse? Sorry?
Two characters I really wanted to talk about was the Mexican.
Good, I'm glad we're going to get there.
We have to talk about him. So America Ferrera, most of us know her as Ugly Betty.
So actually, she was in my IMDb because I remember her from Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants.
Yeah.
Both
I don't actually remember ever watching her in something.
I've not seen Ugly Betty, but I have watched both Sisterhood
back
of
in
the
the day,
Travelling
she was good in Ugly Betty, and Raul Castillo, her partner in it, he was
Domingo. Brigida and Domingo were their names.
See, just those names are like so stereotypically like ridiculous. Like so, he's from this TV show on HBO called Looking. It only lasted like a season, but I recognised him straight away. I really liked that show. It was about like a group of gay guys in San Francisco. He was fantastic in that, and to me, to see these two playing these roles, they're both better than that.
I actually thought I thought they were very funny.
Yeah. I thought they were very funny, but yeah, I guess I can see what Jesse's saying. It was kind of a bit, what are you doing here?
And they made him out to be so stupid, Like,
and you know what? That's a hard role to play.
Yeah,
and they did it really well.
Why do we need these two people to be like
that was comic relief?
Yeah,
more than anything else.
Ricky's supposed to be the funny guy.
Yeah.
So why do we need two people to provide comedic relief when he's supposed to be the funny character that you're supposed to be laughing at?
Yeah, all right. But I thought they were bit parts. They needed that kind of character in there to help hide them out. Yeah. And why not make them funny?
Not sure it would work if they were serious characters.
Probably, yeah. Probably not. But like, I don't know. Do you even need those characters? Like,
I thought they added to it, and I thought they had great chemistry with each other.
I really enjoyed them.
They provide. So I had two laughs in this film. Only 2 in an hour and 40 minutes or whatever it was. I laughed twice.
Was it when they were shouting out the Spanish words?
Correct. That was that was
Real Madrid.
Julio Iglesias.
That was hilarious. That was fantastic.
That was one laugh.
Shout out some Spanish words. That was brilliant. That scene.
So that was good.
I loved it.
The second one was at the end when Ian shoots the bandito and he craps himself. That was the that was the other part. But two laughs in a movie that
Coming back to the characters, what did you think of the chemistry between Eric Bana and Ricky Gervais? As it's kind of like a buddy comedy. You got these two who are buddies. What do you think of the chemistry between those two?
See, I didn't love it, and that's why I was thinking about who else? There are so many other people you could have put in those roles.
Mm-hmm. Eric Bana was incredibly replaceable in this film, incredibly, and he did a fine job. It didn't bother me, but anyone could have done it.
But if you wanted to make it a real funny movie, I'd be like, put Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell.
It's a great, it's a great combo.
I mean, that combo could have made this film funny.
Yeah, but they've done it, and you can't just keep rehashing that.
Why not?
Yeah.
It's better than this shit. I mean,
I thought it was a so-so chemistry.
I agree. I mean, I enjoyed this movie, but their chemistry, I thought it was okay, but wasn't great. Like another guy's kind of duo of.
But that changes everything. This is a Ricky Gervais.
Absolutely
film.
does.
It's a Ricky Gervais film with that Ricky Gervais humour. Straight away, one of his first lines was talking about how he's 25% fat, which is more than some snacks.
Yeah.
And straight away, that makes you smile.
Good. Yeah,
he's charming and he's
makes you smile, doesn't make you laugh.
But I don't think this film was set out to be a laugh out loud knee slapper.
I agree.
Okay,
but there was some moments.
Then what's the point of
what about when America Ferrera was asking Eric Bana if he knew all these particular celebrities?
Just going through the magazine and saying, do you know him? Do you know him?
Again, a lot of racial stereotyping there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're white, you must know this person.
I had a question. The scene where they decide that they're going to go across America to the west coast to get a boat to go to Ecuador, the car that they were in, I couldn't find it anyway, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of Eric Bana's cars. I know he loves his cars and he collects his cars.
Really?
It's just a thought I had. I couldn't find anything anyway, but I reckon that could have been one of Eric Bana's cars because I know that he's a good, he collects cars. So yeah, I just thought the style and the look of the car was like, why would you pick that? It was a really nice sort of vintage sort of car. So that to me, I was thinking about that the whole time.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good thought.
Were there any other scenes that stood out to you or stayed in your mind?
Oh, there was some good scenes in here.
Here we go.
My favourite scene was the shootout at the end when they're getting out of their kidnapper's cabin and you got Motorhead's Ace of Spades playing in the background as they're shooting their way out. I love that scene. Probably more because of Ace of Spades.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that scene of them shooting it out, with Motorhead playing. That was great.
For me, there weren't too many specific scenes that stood out, and I think that stands to the point that I actually thought the film was really well paced. The plot continued to develop really nicely, and whenever we'd sort of been sick of one situation, it just moved on to the next situation. Yep. And a lot of that was to do with the lie getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep.
And I think that was really nice. And as I said, I don't think any scene was the big, this is our big scene. But I do like the way it just kept moving on nicely and it kept me engrossed. And every single time I was kind of about, where's this going now? And it was eventually quite a predictable film.
It was. Yeah.
But it was kind of necessary for it to go down that path as well. If it wasn't predictable, if they didn't get kidnapped in Ecuador at some point, it would have felt flat. Yeah. That had to happen. Yeah. And even though we saw it coming, I think it still had to happen.
I thought the opening scene was really good. Eric Bana walking down the street where he gets the toy, takes the badge off to walk into the crime scene. I thought that was really clever. I really liked that. I'm like, it's a good start to the movie. I'm going to enjoy this, I reckon. Straight away from that scene, I'm like, I think I'm going to enjoy this.
It could have almost been a totally different movie.
Absolutely. It could have.
It starts off, it's this is a journalist who pretends he's a cop to get the inside goss. And you could have had a whole film on that character.
Well, for a while, I thought that's what was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen. But that also set Frank up as the main character for me. Yeah. This is the man. This is the guy we're following.
How good was it when Ian ate the cocaine paper in the prison?
I don't know.
Funny. Very funny.
I didn't laugh because I already had
just laugh then.
The one thing that really got me, the scene where they filmed the hostage video They put it on a USB and they're like, oh, you got to run across the street and put it in the letterbox.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Why not one of the cafe owners do that?
Yeah, or like...
Post it.
Surely the FBI are probably going to say, oh, I've got a ransom video. Where was this filmed? Oh, it was recorded in America.
Yeah.
Like, it just didn't make sense.
Not to mention that nothing actually happened in that scene. They could have just cut it. Like, he went to the letterbox, put it in and left.
Yeah.
Like, I was expecting something to happen.
They showed him hesitate with like, pretending he's in disguise.
I thought something was going to happen.
My big thing of that was just, why did he have to go put it in the letterbox?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't one of the cafe owners? Because, you know, if they see him, it's like, it's all done. Why not send someone else out? Just seems silly that he would be the one to have to go and do it.
Yeah. That was,
Also, I mean, I understand you probably need some fresh air, but they had a balcony. But why are they walking around the street to begin with? It's
absurd.
such a bigger risk. Like, if you're doing this, you know, obviously it's a massive lie, a massive thing they're doing, and then they're out walking on the street just hoping they don't get seen. And at one point, Eric Bana says, you know, we need some fresh air and stuff. But you saw Ricky Gervais at one point putting up like a celebrate dish, so that they had a little outdoor balconies when they could go to get fresh air. Yeah. It was just a silly risk for those characters to take.
The scene wasn't even that.
Given kind of the importance of what they're doing, it's just such a silly thing to do.
Two reasons that they did that. Like, obviously, one was for the development of that whole Ian liking his comic book characters and stuff, because they stopped at that shop window to look at that comic. So obviously that added to him having those valuables that his wife would then sell off, blah, 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 that sort of stuff, and him being a bit of a nerd. And I think the other one was that so that they could get a copy of the newspaper and see themselves on the front of the newspaper.
That's
so they
true.
knew.
Yep.
So yeah,
they could have done that another way.
They could have done it another way, obviously, but I think that was probably an easy way for them to add a couple of extra little developments in there.
Yeah.
I did actually like the scene where they were watching Eleanor on TV and Ian actually admitted, like, he's like, oh, my wife's a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, when he actually finally gets on the same wavelength as the audience, I feel like as an audience member, you get excited for him because he can sort of move on and actually find some proper motivation as opposed to being in his little weird slump. But I actually just love the juxtaposition of them lounging around on the couch while they're watching this show about these guys who are abducted and they're hostage, and they're just sitting there like anyone would be watching it. And then the humour as well comes from the fact that America Ferrera starts to believe the story.
Yeah.
She's like, I just want them to get them out of there.
And send $1 to them, and
I know you're rolling your
I can't
eyes.
see my eyes. My eyes are telling a different
But
story.
the fact is that I find that role that she played difficult to play, and that comedic timing really difficult to do. And I think they both did it really well.
That scene, another thing that I reckon we should talk about, how many opportunities, and I feel like it got drawn out way too much, was there for Frank to tell Ian that he slept with his wife.
Yeah.
I feel like they
I
drew
was
that
wondering
out.
where that came. Like, that didn't even really have to come into it in the end.
But like, there were so many times where it was like, oh, he's going to tell him now, he's going to tell him now.
yeah,
I
I thought that too. Yeah.
Initially, I thought this is going to be, when they got buddied together, I'm like, this is going to be, you know, a bit of turmoil, it's going to come up. But it actually never really mattered. And when he finally told Ian, it didn't matter. Like, they were
And he already
in Ecuador, in jail.
He already hated her.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. There was nothing on the line anymore.
They weren't sure if they were going to live. And
that was kind of an odd decision to even do it in the first place. Like, you didn't actually need that.
I guess that also points more to like the selfishness of Frank. You know, like, he might die, so I want to go with a clear conscience. No matter how it's going to make you feel, I need to tell you this.
Well, we spoke earlier about how we didn't think that Frank's character really evolved or developed or had any self growth. What about Ian?
No, that was I don't think he did either.
No?
I think at the end of the day, it was set up for him to develop.
Yeah.
And on the surface, he kind of does, because he takes that cocaine, he leaves his wife, but he never actually felt like he was changing. It was more just used as plot development than character development.
Yeah, I think more like when he was talking about, hey, he's done these, he's reported on the Olympics and things like that. He's like, oh no, it's all from the office. He's never left. So I guess the fact that he did actually go out and have to go out, kind of, you know, like we talked about last week in the movie of Pee-wee, like stepping out of your comfort zone. I felt he had to step out of his comfort zone a bit to actually, you know, go out to Ecuador. So I guess that was that little bit, but can you see there wasn't much.
He just seemed like the same character at the start than he was at the end.
I feel like there was a little bit of growth in him, because like you said, he set up that whole studio in that above the restaurant for them, so he was the one that was clever enough to organise that. He was the one who had all the special effects for Frank, so Frank wouldn't have been able to do or play the whole fake story without him being there. And then obviously they get to Ecuador. He stands up to his wife and he says, take the money 50-50, so he decides, you know, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm going to stand up to you, take the money. Gets to Ecuador, obviously stands up, does the cocaine, defeats the bad guys, and then when they arrive, you know, he gets off. Yes, Frank says he's the hero, he's the real one that's done all this, but then he does that coffee scene where he goes and buys the coffee for the chick as well. Yeah, so I feel like, you know, they tried.
I agree, they tried, but I didn't feel it in the character, because everything you just said then was a different plot point, that someone had to do something and he did it because it just fit in with the plot, as opposed to him actually changing as a character. That's how I felt about it. Like, literally felt like the same guy at the end that it was at the start. He just had different circumstances.
Different perspectives, different people. So yeah, I mean, they do. Obviously, the film finishes with him walking away.
I think that was cute, and I like the fact that it was awkward, because the characters didn't fit in with having like a big kiss or a big hug celebration, and that was nice. But were you guys hoping that there'd be a bit more of a public snub of Eleanor at that point? I know it wasn't within his character to be like, oh no, I'm not your wife. And I know he did that, like, back away when she tried to give him a hug. Yeah. But she's there talking about her new album and she's in front of the media. It would have been nice for them to be like, you guys aren't actually together. I kind of wanted to...
Yeah, I think it would have been good. I guess it's also kind of would have been risky, because she knew that they weren't really kidnapped, so you never know how she might react and be like, oh, you know...
I suppose,
they could out them. But yeah, I would have liked some kind of blowback on how much of a bad person Eleanor was.
Yeah. So we've sort of briefly touched on it, mentioned it. So the whole thing of this fake news. Massive sort of thing with this fake news. So what do you believe, what don't you believe when you see sort of media coverage, and what can you believe? So I think they highlighted that really well with the reporter on TV who was like, you know, just, oh yeah, I know.
Heard about him for a few days, so didn't want him developed.
You know, they just created this, you know, this villain.
And it was just make believe.
So what were they trying to say about the news? Like,
it was criticism.
Yeah.
It was a criticism of the way that the industry behaves. But I thought it worked well as a nice motive for the film as well.
Yeah.
I took a little bit of another approach with it as well. I thought like they were sort of making a bit of a critique of radio as well, almost. There are a couple of scenes where, like, you know, they said radio is a dead technology and things like that. So it was weird. Sort of, you're seeing this progress, and I feel like they were pumping television up. Like, all the things Eleanor did were on TV, magazines, photo shoots, and that sort of thing. So I reckon.
But the only way they were relevant on radio is because nobody else got into the border.
Yeah.
And they even made that point when they were like the highest media station in the city or something. Like, we never thought we'd be here.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Well, I guess it also seems strange that they would even send them in the first place to Ecuador for just a local radio station to send guys to Ecuador. Just seemed like a weird decision just in general for them to even be sent there.
True. But maybe that's because the way they're trying to show it is there aren't that many radio stations around anymore.
Yeah,
radios. Yeah.
But weren't they even talking at the start when Frank and Eleanor met at the bar, when he was like, "So why radio? Why did you choose radio?"
Yeah. Yeah. So good, bads.
This one got me thinking. And I suppose this is a question I can pose to you guys in general. At what point do you back out of a lie? Were you watching this film expecting them to back out at any point? And because they had plenty of opportunities to get out of it, and they kept making it worse for themselves. You know, how else could that have played out? I loved it, and I thought I was continuously thinking about when they were going to pull out, and I knew they probably weren't. But how else could they have played this, and at what point could it have still been feasible for them to?
I think pretty early on, like, they had to do it. Otherwise, it just got too far. Like, once they did, I think that first report and the second report, it's kind of like, no, you've gone too far now. You go back now, and it's like, what on earth have you been doing then? What were you thinking? I reckon kind of once they got in, I mean, it just kept escalating, and they just couldn't
Get to the embassy.
Yeah, I think there was only one scene too where they sort of had that reflection where Ian was like, oh, you know, we've gone too far, I'm out, I've done it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, that could have been fed, you know, a little bit more throughout the whole thing. Like, there's a little bit of regrets about what they were doing the whole time.
A bit more regret involved, Yeah,
it's a tricky one though, because they once they were in. There was no real way to back out, because if they did, they'd lose their you know, it would never work again. Yeah.
I actually kind of wish there had been more of a brainstorm about what they could have done. They kind of glossed over that really quickly. They were just like, oh, what can we do? Let's just set it up here and do it. So it could have been more like halfway through they would have been like, oh, if we just had done this that we spoke about, but it never really got to that point. But the lie spiraling out of control was probably the best part of the film.
Yeah.
That was what kept you engaged and kept
was fantastic,
progressing
yeah.
the plot. And,
Yeah.
it was very enjoyable.
I just thought the whole thing was pretty corny.
Yeah, I
be
can
honest.
see that.
Massively corny. Like, just these two guys that completely different characters. It's like just the perfect setup that, very unrealistic.
Well, to me, it feels like a relaxed comedy.
Yeah.
And you don't actually get overly invested in it. And the characters don't really develop, as I sort of spoke about. There was no massive romantic ending or a storyline with a romantic ending that get any oxygen. But all in all, there was no real massive investment required by the viewer, and it didn't draw you in.
Yeah.
But I still think it was enjoyable enough to sit there and watch and enjoy and see it all unfold.
Yeah, if Frank died, I wouldn't have cared. If he had got killed in Ecuador, I wouldn't have cared.
Well, I don't know. But, I mean, I'm not like...
I didn't care about him enough as a character. Because
fair
he
enough.
literally, he hadn't done anything good in the film.
No.
Everything he'd done was based on being deceiving people.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't a good bloke.
No, he wasn't.
But that's the thing. It got to the point where why was he? Was he just there as a vehicle for Ian Finch's character to move through? Because as I said, he doesn't change at all, Frank. And what's the point of it then? Is it a comparison? This is how different those characters are.
Yeah. Well, they are. They're completely separate.
Because you don't really care for him. I would have been. I don't know. I don't think I would have enjoyed him to die.
Yeah, I didn't want him to die, but I guess I can see a point of view.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I wanted him.
You weren't,
Like,
but you weren't
you're not
invested in
invested,
much
no.
in this film.
Yeah.
You're right. You're not invested in much.
Nah, it's just really easy just to sit there and watch. I just thought really enjoyable. I mean, I thought it was a bit predictable, a bit obvious of how it was going to turn out. I didn't get when they escape and the other prisoners are there, like the ones that were serving them food that opened the gate. Why didn't they escape
I
too?
thought that as well.
They just stayed there.
The bloke who opened the gate was the guy who gave them the food.
Why don't they jump on? Why don't they jump on? They stop and jump on. What? They're just there cheering them, going, get free.
Well done.
Why didn't they escape?
Yeah, I thought
That was weird.
I thought that would have been nice to see them jump on the back.
Also, like the captors, the rebels, spoke English to each other the whole time. They're talking about how they mentioned quite a few times how they speak Spanish in Ecuador, yet the rebels speak English to each other, and that it was just a bit weird for
Cost
me.
me too much to
Yeah,
subtitle it.
put subtitles in, but
It's gone the cheap way out.
this one just seemed a bit cheap. I was like, this doesn't quite fit in there.
It probably fit with the way the film was, though. That really laid back comedy and.
So would have it made any difference watching this on the big screen, or any time of day that you'd recommend watching it?
Not really. I mean, in terms of the big screen, I think I would have still enjoyed it on the big screen.
Yeah, I think it would have been right on the big screen.
The Ace of Spades would have been great blasting through the speakers. For me, it was just really enjoyable to watch. Kind of sit down at any time and just relax for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we went for, and just enjoyed it. Yeah.
It's a pretty classic Netflix kind of film.
Yeah.
It's in the right environment.
It's a good film. I'd say doing the ironing, don't need to focus too much. You want to focus on ironing your clothes and not worry about what's
And
in the
let's not
background.
take away from the Ricky Gervais wit. Like, he's a funny man. He does it so well.
He does.
And he still got it in this. Like, he still makes it chuckle.
So, IMDb, any stage where you had to look up anything?
I jumped on when they had the rival reporter in Ecuador, because I thought he's just a classic. I have seen him in so many things. I can't remember his name, but I've seen him in everything. So I had to jump on just to look at his name. It was Benjamin Bratt.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was one. I'm like, I've seen you in like 15 different things. I know exactly who you are. I just don't know what your name is.
Did you see any of the things that he was in where you're like, oh, that's what I've seen?
He's Snitch and Law and Order. He was in Miscongeniality and Traffic, and I'm like, I've seen all these things. I just got no idea what your name was.
Just can't quite break it.
Yeah.
If you're in Miscongeniality, yeah.
When did you jump on it, MJ?
Just as I said before with Brigida for
Yep.
America Ferrera with Sister with the Travel Pants.
What about you, Jesse?
I got on during when they arrived in Ecuador, because I was like, this sort of location, like where, like I thought maybe it was filmed in Hawaii or somewhere, because obviously I don't know, the only place I could find where they'd filmed was New York and Toronto, so.
Yeah, New York and Toronto.
So it's a nice sort of green, luscious, tropical sort of location that they've obviously just created somewhere.
Yeah.
So that, I thought that was interesting.
I got a hypothetical question for you boys.
Yeah, good. I like these.
Whether it's a week, a month, years, are they ever found out? Does someone slip up at some point talking about something down the track? Do you reckon they're ever found out? Or was it
maybe?
Or was the secret stay with him?
The only person
It'd have to.
Alan or Alan should drop it somewhere.
Or does Finch tell Claire once they get together and says, "Hey, I've actually got to tell you something." Do you reckon it ever happens? Have they ever found out?
Maybe they need a sequel so we can find him.
Maybe.
Special correspondence.
Him and Claire might not even work.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Can't see it happening.
No. But either way, I think if you're talking about logically, then 100% they would have got found out.
Have to be somewhere.
But yeah, I never thought of that. Didn't bother me either.
Yeah, like the guys that they gave the money to for the boat.
Yeah.
Surely that would have been like...
They were just cruising around in a car for obviously what took a day or two.
No one recognised them across the trip.
They didn't even try and cover their faces. And they're like headline news. Yeah. These guys are missing. Yeah.
No, it's 2 movies in a row we've had a character driving across the country. These films are all...
It's very true. And whilst we're talking about similarities, did my dog bark in this movie?
Oh, here we go.
Yes, he did when there were horses in Ecuador. So we did pretty well for most of this movie. He enjoyed it for most of it, but when the horses were there, he really wanted a slice of that.
So I've got a quote. So the film, when it's talking about journalism, it's talking about you've got substance versus style. Obviously, Frank is all about the style. He's all about hamming up the story, talking about the story, making it sound.
He's very good at it too.
Yeah, and he's a storyteller. He's a storyteller. So what's the difference between a news or someone who actually delivers the news and a storyteller, or are they both the same thing?
Well, in this day and age,
it's tricky. It's really tricky because
in this day and age, news is a 150 character tweet. Saying something's happened,
and the quickest person to get it out.
Yeah, and it's no longer that stage where you fact check and you look at your sources and those sorts of things. You want to be the first to get it out, so you're the first.
Which is why substance does matter, because if you get that wrong, then you've lost all credibility.
Whereas Frank obviously more the showman, and obviously was happy to make up the lies just to because of his image. He wanted to be that big.
Although it was Finch's idea to make up the lie.
It was.
He was the one that said, "Let's create it." So
true.
But then, at the start, he obviously was able to come up with that story about the Russian
about the gang war and stuff for the murder. Yeah.
So, very interesting. I reckon it's almost time to tell us our ratings. Talk about what we've given the film out of 5. Peter, go for it.
Sure. So I enjoyed this movie. It had me laughing quite a bit. Obviously, I think it dragged out a bit and a few kind of potholes here and there. But overall, I really enjoyed the movie. I gave it a 3 out of 5.
Good.
MJ?
I really enjoyed the idea of that lie continuing to spiral out of control. And generally, it was an enjoyable storyline. It's probably at the right timing in the world when you consider the ability to work remotely and that pack mentality of the media. And for me, a pretty easy 3 stars.
Oh, good. I struggled at times. I thought it was corny. The story made sense. The acting was okay. So I'm not going to completely write it off, but I feel like that, there were stages throughout that I really struggled to get through because it was an awkward placement of Ricky Gervais and Eric Bana. So 2 out of 5 for me.
When you were saying that sentence, I struggled to get through because of awkward.
Yeah.
If I'm going to cut that down, I could have said you're talking about Pee-wee. Pee-wee's Big Holiday.
We could.
But you gave Pee-wee 3?
I did give Pee-wee 3 and I gave this 2. So for me, I think that Pee-wee had a bit more underneath the story than.
I'm sorry to bring back last week's one because obviously it's still staying.
Still with raw. Me. It's still stuck in your mind. This one I felt like it had the idea of that fake news and the issues that you can have with fake news, but I feel like it didn't really play with it at all. It was just literally let's try and make jokes that weren't funny with 2 awkward characters.
Yeah, I can see that. And Ricky Gervais certainly. If you like him, you'll enjoy it.
I do like him too, and I think he's good. I haven't seen. Has anyone here seen the one where he plays David Brent as the musician, The Life on the Road? Yeah, the documentary. I haven't seen that either. So
no.
Maybe that will provide me with some more entertainment and laughs rather than him with Eric Bana.
So that averaged out to a 2.7 out of 5.
2.7 out of 5
overall for the film.
Not too bad at all. So that pretty much brings us to the end of our episode today. On social media, we'd ask you to follow us where you can on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. We are at Flix Forum. This week, we're going to have a question on there, and we want to know: are we all vulnerable to fake news? So it's a good topic of conversation that we can have this week on our social media platforms. Next week, we're going to be looking at the 2016 action comedy The Do-Over, starring Adam Sandler and David Spade. So we hope that you can get some time this week to watch the film, so you can join in next week with our discussion.
So next week's episode 6. So that's 2 of the first 6 films were the Sandler ones.
Yeah.
Really
So
bought into him.
they did, and I think they needed a big star to set up Netflix.
Smart.
And I'm sure we'll probably talk about that a bit more next week. But thanks again, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the Savo.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Great.
Been
Thank you very much.
Been good. And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah. Cheers.